Hello, everyone. We're going to give a couple of seconds to let everyone join and get settled. All right. Thank you so much for joining us today for Therapeutic Gaming, transforming gaming from an escape to an intervention. First, as a brief disclaimer, this presentation was prepared for the Great Lakes ATTC under a cooperative agreement from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, or SAMHSA. All material appearing in this presentation, except that taken directly from copyrighted sources, is the views of the speaker. Just a few housekeeping items. If you're having any technical issues, please individually message me, Amalia Cabigas Bustamante, in the chat section at the bottom of the screen, and I'll be happy to assist you. And then if you have any questions for the speaker, please put your questions in the chat and the speaker will answer those. Here's a few more housekeeping items. If captions or live transcript would be helpful for you, please locate that option in your Zoom toolbar. This session offers certificates of attendance. They will be sent out via email. This session does not offer CEs. And then at the end of this session, you will be directed to a short survey link at the end of today's presentation. All right, and I will hand it off to our speaker.
Well, thank you, Amalia, for that wonderful introduction. And thank you, Isa, for inviting me to speak today. I'm very excited to present with you guys and get to know everybody and share a little bit about my research and my passion with therapeutic gaming. Okay. So before we get into the meat of the presentation, I thought I'd give everybody a little bit of an origin story. Therapeutic gaming really started from a themological point of view. When I started off in the mental health field, I was a therapeutic mentor, which is a part of the Children's Behavioral Health Initiative. And I would work alongside the therapist and take people into the community and meet with children from 7 all the way up until transition into adulthood 21. And I started to notice a lot of 17, 18, 19-year-old clients, usually young boys, who sometimes would be at home all day. They have dropped out of school and they were really struggling to go out into the community with me. So I had to really get to build a relationship and a rapport with them to understand who they are. And it had to start with video games. I could think of one client now in which I had to beat him in Call of Duty before he trusted me enough to then slowly make it out to the living room. And from the living room, by the end of our mentoring work together, he was climbing Mount Tom and looking at all of the views in Western Massachusetts. He was doing a yoga class, and he ended up getting a job at the local gaming store. However, the more I started to do my research, I realized it went even deeper than that. One of the first questions I always ask my groups when we get together is like, who introduced you to video games? It's usually a very significant person in their lives. And one of the key things that I always say is gaming is like an antidote to aloneness. And I was starting to remember when I was a child, young, I have two older sisters, and the middle sister is about 4 years older, and the oldest is 5. And they would never let me play with them. So I had to find any way. We were out in Delaware on a summer vacation. We had the Nintendo, and my sisters were playing Mario, and they would not let me play. I come home, and my fantastic grandparents bought me my own system, and I really started to play a lot. And this was really kind of my own personal experience. So there's been many experiences throughout my life. As we see for this overview, we're going to be talking a little bit about gaming and social isolation research. And this is really helpful to know. You need to understand the topological point of view of all where the research is coming out strong now. And what we're seeing is more and more research being done. So I thought I would share a little bit of the insights as to what I've encountered. And I created my dissertation around, it finished around 2019, and I keep trying to update the research. So a lot of it is over a span of almost a decade now. And so we're going to talk about the research so you can get a understanding of the overview and how I've used that to guide some of my practice and my theory. And we have to work with families, so we all have to understand what it means for parents and children. I remember one of my feedback for my dissertation was a family friend who's a world famous analyst, and he loved all the material, but he wanted me to ask one question is, what does gaming mean to them? And that has been a guiding principle throughout my whole practice is no matter what you do, no matter how therapeutic gaming manifests in our sessions with our clients, it's what does gaming mean to them? And that pursuit of that question in and of itself can, without even playing one video game, not everybody has to be a gamer to do this method. And if you can keep that in mind and maintain that curiosity, you'll understand more about your client, not just within the gaming world, but within their whole life. And so we have to talk about, when working with families, what we need to understand, what they need to understand, what we need to find out, right? And how we start to shape not just the individual, but the whole family system, right? Although the work is primarily individual therapy, there's been a lot of research on the effectiveness of family therapy. Although I have not had a chance yet, I'm close to being able to do it in a family therapy capacity. That primarily I've done it in individual. I just do it every day with my young clients, and in the group setting. So we'll talk a little bit about both modalities as well. And then I'm going to get really into the method, into theory, how you do this. And it's not just playing video games. It's a blend of, it's a form of play therapy. It's the evolution of play therapy. Except for the play therapy realm is now in the virtual world. We're meeting our clients where they're at. All right, to go, if you want more of an origin story, I got more for you. As a millennial in our generation, really got to experience the transition from technology, in which developed so rapidly within a short period of time. My generation really got to experience life without technology. The old classic, you can hear it from older generations, which is, why don't you go out and ride your bike, play in the streets, play out with your play with your neighbors. I had plenty of that. However, we had our, what do they call those track phones, where you had to buy minutes, and every text message was like 25, like a quarter of a credit, all the way up to being able to play online gaming, which is what we see a lot with problematic gaming. So we really get to witness this. I have one foot in both worlds. But as we see, technology is getting more and more advanced, and really therapy needs to catch up. And to take an antiquated view to say that we need to stay with our traditional methods, I think is getting really away from the spirit and the creativity and the evolution of psychotherapy as a craft. So technology is getting more and more sophisticated. If you're looking into quantum, it's entering the quantum world, and we have AI now, and which has real impacts on the environment and is very concerning. However, it's also helped me build my deck. It's a very complicated and conflictual development. And so we're all kind of grappling with this as a society, and how this interfaces with education, and how this interfaces with family functioning. I have 2 children. I have a 3-year-old and a 2-year-old. And so we really have to understand that for children today, there is no world without technology. Well, and it's part of our obligation to make sure they understand the world without it. And as parents, what does it mean to monitor it? It starts very young, and when we encounter clients with problematic gaming, they're in deep. And I will share some clinical experiences, but a lot of clients, they're in deep when they're not showering, they're not sleeping, they're not taking care of themselves, they're failing in school, family conflicts and blow-ups. When somebody was really, when I first started working with them, he wouldn't even take a bathroom break. He would pee into cups. You could not leave the video game system. But for today, there is no world without technology. So for both parents and children, we all have to be mindful of monitoring our screen time. It starts from birth. If anybody took a look at their phone right now and look at the data of how long they spend on their phone, I'd be surprised if not everybody was appalled. If you go to a coffee shop, who isn't on their cell phone? People can't sit anymore. They can't sit in a third space and just be. They have to anxiously look at their phone. There's a larger trend here. So although we'll be talking about gaming, if you want to understand this developmentally, my 2 and 3-year-old, they're not able to play video games, but they love their Peppa Pig, and it transfixes them. We had an early experience with my first son when he was just born. We were trying to go out to dinner. We were stressed out, wondering if he's going to be quiet, and it was packed, and we were waiting, and he was in his little car seat, and I had my phone out playing the dancing fruit, and an older couple looked over to us and said, "Starting them early, aren't you?" And I said, "It's also pretty quiet, isn't it?" So you have to. It's just like a sedative, and I don't take a sanctified point of view in that it is completely damaging, because there's nothing like watching a TV show at the end of the day. I love that. I love my shows. So you look at television and gaming, it's like an emotional sedative. And it's really up to parents from birth, right, to monitor that. So let's get a little bit into the research. So Limon, Rangani, and Toto conducted a meta-analysis to understand what are we looking at for prevalence? What are the behaviors and what are the predictive factors? Let's try to get ahead of it. If anybody knows the youth today, we know this is getting out of hand. And they reviewed over 693 articles, and they narrowed it down to 27 studies. Now, this range is quite large, as we know, with the rather imperfect perfection of research, nature of research. But the pooled prevalence rate is around 5%, which is around 3.65 million children in the US. I think that's a little under. And if you look at the young children and adolescents, and even young adults, and even adults, I work with a 34-year-old schizophrenic, and he loves playing League of Legends, but he really is trying hard to rank up the system to get out of bronze to the next stage. But poor guy can never get out. He's always going and gathering materials and avoiding every fight and dying. And what we notice is the themes that we see in the video game world parallel his real life. He's alone, he's isolated, he has a major mental illness, he has a trauma history from hell, and luckily got him into his own place through the Department of Mental Health. But he's alone, he's alienated, he has been his whole life, and I'm trying to pull him out of that. And you could see the parallels in the gaming world. So we see this with children, but we also can see it with adults, and we can use it therapeutically. So we're looking at what are the genres that the youth like to play today. What consoles are they playing on? The most popular game genre is action games, and first-person shooter, in which you are looking down the sights of a gun, is a very adrenalating and exciting way to play video games. I love first-person shooters. Sports and racing was a close third. I think the true gamers love PCs, because PCs can be highly customizable. And I work with a 14, maybe 15-year-old now, and we have this debate about Mac and Windows or PC, and he hates the Mac, and I'm fighting back with him, and then I realize I'm trying to understand where he's coming from. And he's having the same argument with his father, who has Mac, and he's an architect, and he loves his Mac. I love my Mac. Well, it turns out you can't play all video games. They're not compatible, cross-play. And he really wants to play with his father, and he really wants to play with me. And as soon as I understood that, all the steam went right out of my top hat. But you could play on consoles, which is Xbox. And, I'm struggling to keep up. I keep referring to systems that are a decade old, and everyone laughs at me, tablets and smartphones. And when we use this in therapeutic gaming in session, likely, if you're doing telehealth, this is an excellent way to bring play therapy, which has always been a notoriously difficult task to translate to telehealth, because you don't have the play therapy, you don't have the tools, you don't have the space, and you don't have the tools. But with the virtual world and therapeutic gaming, you do. You have everything you need there. So use what you have. Online gaming trends. This was one of the biggest shifts I noticed throughout my lifetime, was that a video game, like a book, had a beginning, middle, and end. And what we see is throughout time, you get to now play with people in your school, in another state, in another country. And when we see problematic gaming, what we see, which is a part of that sleep disruption, is people develop meaningful relationships with people in a different time zone. The prime time to play video games is like between 12 and 3, 4 in the morning. And sometimes that is because who they're playing with is in another country. So what we see is online gamers are typically more addicted than offline gamers. Online gamers reported higher levels of irritability, anger, and craving to play video games. This was something that I noticed in high school. I remember being in chemistry class, which was always the bane of my existence. And I was a two-sport athlete, and it was the winter season. I had it off, and I just could not wait to get home and play Call of Duty. That was the game of the time. And what I noticed in that craving was when you hit a target in Call of Duty, there's a certain sound that is made and a certain vibration of the controller. And I was craving that feeling. It was actually a sensory craving that I was experiencing. And so when we look at the experience of gaming, it's very immersive. It's multidimensional, right? And we see higher rates for problematic gaming than offline gamers. And there's higher levels of anger and craving, respectively. Now, this is an app. It's like kind of like a social app for gamers that you can get on. As you can see, you see 2 games right there on the bottom: Overwatch and Apex Legends. You're not going to know all the games out there, but that's the fun, right? Is getting to understand what these games. They're really works of art. And, of course, like everything, it's not free from corruption. When you look at microtransactions, it's created a lot of headaches. Where, oh yeah, the game's free, however, they want all the latest things. But Overwatch and Apex Legends. Overwatch is I think you have to pay for that one, but Apex Legends is free. But what I want to direct your attention here is to look at the times in which he is playing. And he's played Overwatch for an accumulated 3 days, like 24-hour days of his life were spent playing this game. And we would actually use this frequently, not only as a measure of whether or not he found somebody who could be a good member of his Overwatch team, but to understand his time spent playing and his sleep hygiene. What they determine is if you can keep the average around 2 hours a day, it's considered normal. And it's the same metric that we use for monitoring TV with our children. Now, I would be lying to say that when that 2-hour mark, do we cut it off immediately? Depends on how tired we are and how much energy we have to play. And that's really the answer. Our children much rather play, and if it was up to them. But it's hard when you have 2 working professionals. You have to dig deep. That's what I tell myself every day. I want to dig deep. And if you can get 20 quality minutes playing with your children where you're not asking questions, you're not directing, and you're allowing them to direct the play, that's everything. And this model is very much also focused. I have a psychodynamic frame. We have a play therapy frame and an attachment. Our goal is to facilitate the reworkings of insecure attachment to a more secure place. So gaming starts to increase to the 5-hour range, we're hitting the red zone for problematic addictive gaming. So psychological and personal predictors. Problematic gaming is associated with lower levels of self-esteem, life satisfaction, and social support. We found that 38.5% of the addict gamers would score well academically compared to 51.2 non-addicted gamers. This is a big source of stress, which is very much connected to disrupted sleep. However, when kids are failing at school, they're good in a video game. The video game world is often the only place in which they're good at something. And you gotta find out how good they are. There's a lot of clients that I've worked with that throughout the world, they're like in the top 500. And it's an immense source of pride. You can't miss it. You have to understand it. Or they might be like my adult client, no matter how hard he tries, he's stuck in bronze. And addictive gaming can cause insomnia, right, and anxiety. And addicted gamers show more social jet lag and sleep disturbance. The loop of causality. We have a client with anxiety, social withdrawal, and poor academic scores. They are both predictors and effects of problematic gaming. So if you see these, they're more likely to use video games to soothe that distress. And also, the more they game, the more these effects kind of amplify or are resistant to change. And this is the loop. A child or adolescent with an anxiety disorder plays more video games until it becomes problematic. Then the anxiety intensifies. They have this subtle feeling that the game no longer brings them joy, and it starts to feel more like real life. So they dive deeper into it, which causes further social and academic scores and engagement and performance. So what did the research say about treatment interventions? Right? That interventions that effectively reduce gaming time improve life satisfaction. And we have to help kids understand a profitable use of the internet and increase connectedness with both family and friends. So when your connectedness is primarily found online, it meets an essential need. And not all long-distance friendships are created equally, so to speak. And you can get two kids who are equally struggling with psychiatric issues and just absolutely need to spend every minute of time of their day together. And then I've also seen clients become like mentors and develop solid relationships and even travel out to conventions, anime conventions, gaming conventions like PAX, and meet up with these people. The big fantasy of the union of the online friendship. So real-life gaming understands stress and self-regulation, allocating attention from in-game actions to within-group interactions in the group modality, and reflecting on oneself. We have to get at all those underlying emotions and conflicts that are at play. As we noticed, this model was created for treatment-resistant clients, youngsters, especially when problematic gaming is the problem. I can think of a client now in which before it was a recommendation from a psychologist who did the testing and said, you'd be perfect for this kiddo and this family. And when I met this family, there was an intense control on it. There's not always just the freedom to play as you wish, which is typically what I see the most, which is hard to reverse. This family was an over-control, over-constriction, in which it wasn't 2 hours a day. He had 2 hours on Saturday and 2 hours on Sunday when his friends had complete reign. So this created a lot, and he could not play shooting games. He was playing the whole time, right? But I had to convince the mother and the father. The mother was a little bit more challenging, who was the one who actually was her religious beliefs that was really stark against violence, and that really created a spiritual confliction. But as soon as I was able to get through to her and understand that he hasn't connected with any therapist. His last one was an ecotherapist. Wonderful. They're out in nature. I love nature, as the gamers call it, touching grass. Love it. However, he didn't like it. It didn't last. He didn't open up. But as soon as he knows that he can game for an hour during our session time, he was in. As soon as he can understand that I could try to influence his parents a little bit to loosen up and understand him, he was in. So we have to work with families. We got to reflect on the dynamics. So how do parents view gaming? How do they manage it, right? As I mentioned, there's the overly constricted, and there's the freedom to play as you wish. And what are the discussions positive and negative? How severe and lasting are the conflicts? Parents often feel helpless in this, and they can really bring forth rage and resentment, where you can see popular videos online. I see a father who, with his teenage son, who appeared up to be on this spectrum, I'm assuming, would take his system out and run it over with a lawnmower, and he would lose his mind. It was like he's being stabbed with an ice pick through his chest. Or take the gaming system and smash it with a sledgehammer. I'm sure you guys have seen these videos. It breaks my heart. And is there a family history of mental health issues, addiction, trauma, conflict, financial stress, work stress? What is the Bronfenbrenner model? How are all these systems working to affect the child? What is the family bonding like? How do the parents support their child's social and leisure activities? What I will get to further on is, what is the goal here? I tend to not like to use the addiction language, especially the younger they are, and no matter where they are in the developmental time. I prefer the term problematic gaming. However, sometimes it really helps when youngsters are able to identify their own behaviors as addictive. But I encourage caution of using that label, because you could see it just filled with anger and rage when you sit with parents. They're addicted to video games. Yeah, well, it looks like and we're also addicted to our emails. We're also addicted to TikTok. We're not completely free of this. What's your addiction? It's a matter of what causes the most damage or is the most healthy. So what's their involvement like? When did problematic, this is an important one. When did it become a problem? Because it never occurs in isolation. It's usually a response to some family dynamics. And what were the family factors involved? You have to understand this. There was a point in time in which this got bad. And what we see with the gamer is a set of blinders are put up. It's too hard to confront the severity and intensity of their life struggles and challenges of just complete and utter failure at every turn until they're in the gaming world, right? So they're not thinking, they can't think about it. They can't confront it. They don't feel safe enough. They have to selectively choose. And when we get into the mentalization theory, that's a part of the pretend mode, which is a precursor to mentalization. And the pretend mode means that what I do, what I play, has no bearing on external reality. And they can be selective in terms of what they want to incorporate from reality into their world, right? So they're selectively pushing away all of the problems. And they're not just theirs, right? So we have to take a family systems perspective here. And how do they address the gaming impact on sleep and daily activities? I mean, this is if you can change anything, if you can improve sleep, you'll improve all the functioning, no matter who you're working with, right? And how you, as the clinician, views the problem matters. So parent and caregiver self-reflection, right? If you're working with them, you have to ask, how much do you see gaming as the main issue compared to other factors? Ask parents, are they comfortable discussing their struggles in supporting their child's emotional well-being? As soon as they can shift their mind from gaming being the problem to the gaming as a response to other problems, change. The cyberkinetic family systems. You have to understand how the system's functioning from a psychodynamic point of view, be pulled into the countertransference dynamics, right? And then recover your connection with yourself. right? You get a little taste of what it's like to be in this family system, right? And we have to understand how do they approach not only gaming but every other struggle. How are they approaching the academic difficulties? Are they just using as another point of shame and resentment and anger and another point of evidence in their argument in the court as to why this is ruining their lives? Are there marital discords going on, right? That usually sometimes a single parent who's overburdened, who's overworked, has their own trauma history, has 4 to 5 kids, or a grandparent who's trying to, take two on the old parenting and have to try to raise their child's children. And how curious they are about gaming. I find myself taking sometimes an overly negative parental point of view of this. However, there's a lot of parents who are gamers themselves, who love gaming. And when I think of an adult I work with and I talk about implementing family gaming time, he wants his child, his 7-year-old, to love the games that he loves. I said, you're missing the point here. This ain't about you, right? Maybe, eventually, but this has to be about him. So how do they set aside their biases or become aware of their biases to connect with their children? And you have to consider the impact of generational differences, past social expectations. When I work with parents, I have to explore what their life was like when they were their child's age. What did they do? I remember my father telling me stories about stickball in the streets of East Boston, where they would cut the ball in half and they would get a broomstick and they would play. Sounds both really hard and really fun, right? But are they taking their lives and their expectations of what it means to be young and social and not allowing it to shift and change and to coalesce with what's going on now with their child and the world? Are they expecting them to be just like them? Now, what we see in punishment and reward schedules, gaming is usually the first thing that is taken away because of its valence, the importance, and how much it means to them. So what we see is, do they use it in their punishment? And do they use it to punish them for poor grades, right? And this works best. It can work. However, as we see with a lot of behavior strategies, sometimes it's really hard to get clients to be consistent with it. Even if they really are trying, it's hard. I notice myself as a parent, it's really hard to be consistent, but it takes a lot of effort and firm boundaries in terms of holding up the limitations to access when needed. But it has to be appropriate and fair. And there has to be communication around why and how long and what's the impact on them, right? And what are the alternatives to do with the limited access to this? Right? If you just take it away and let them stew in their own heartbreak and anger and rage, you have a client in a dangerous place. I find I've worked with a client who, you take away video games, he's got nothing left. You're more resistant actually to intervention. You've taken everything that means something to me. We know what that does to a person. It pushes them into extremes. They're willing to go to really any lengths. And what we see is sometimes in this family conflict, especially in older, the transition into adulthood, is the use of coercion, using anger and outbursts that are so intolerable that it overwhelms parents and they give in. Or vice versa, where parents use the same coercion and fear and anger to induce submissiveness and compliance to authority. How long is the restriction? Days, months, indefinite? Are the consequences fair? And do they set clear steps for regaining access? As you can see, and as I alluded to, I'm not the most astute clinician for behavioral schedules and reinforcements, much more humanistic, psychodynamic, and relational. However, there is a time and place for it. And the younger the child is, the less responsive they are to language And so you have to use action and you have to use behavior schedules to deliver the message. But the question is, how is it done? Is it done compassionately and empathetically? That we have to do it. And this is why, right? Which is a reflection, right? And an exploration of what they're going through and the parental, discussion around why they have to do this. Now, and they also reward the child's positive behavior. That is very easy to just use it as a penalty, as a punishment. It's easy to do that. The question is, can you also use your metric for time spent playing? Can you enhance it? Right? Can you identify not only the behaviors you want to reduce, but the behaviors you want to enhance? And do you use it there? If you can't use it to reward positive behavior, what is the valence of the punishment? There's going to be none. It's just punishment, right? So you need to balance that out and get more of it for them to build their own intrinsic motivation to get more, which means they have to do more prosocial behavior. Now, suicide and violence risk assessment. Now, when you look at the Columbine shootings, if you look in news articles, or even in the research, and does video games lead to an increase in violent behavior? There's a whole camp of researchers that say, yeah, they've done fMRIs, they are sure that it does. And there's a whole group that says no. So the research group is rather split. Through my work with clients, when you have a problematic gamer, they're struggling. They're in a very fragile place. And even they themselves know, which you'll see when they're playing video games, whether they're smashing controllers, right, or wanting to tear their room up, or they're rage quitting, that the game is no longer providing them with that safe place. They can't. When they start to lose in the one space in which they felt safe in, it starts to feel too much like real life. And they just keep pouring themselves deeper and deeper. Now, if somebody is struggling with depression, right, and suicidal thoughts, or violence, right, that you have to be very mindful of just ripping it away, in a way like you would with someone who is, alcohol use, that you have to, through very supervised medical treatment, titrate that down, use of Librium and lorazepam, right? And it's deadly to just pull something, to just stop drinking if you're physically dependent on it. We have to kind of take this mindset, right? That I remember my substance use professor go through all of the slides of all the different substances and really say the most addictive substances really spike dopamine, right? So, although I encourage softening the language a little bit, it is an addiction, more similar to behavioral addictions like gambling or shopping. But if there's suicidal thoughts or violence within the home, within the community, and a lot of rage swimming around, gaming can amplify that. Games can get more and more twisted. And I can think of a client I work with, right? The client who had a very constricting view on gaming, he was getting really morbid in his gameplay. And while we were doing it and I was joining him and I was watching him, I would just kind of point it out to him that he's maiming a dead body. And so here his parents put me in a little tricky position, right? Which, if the parents found out that he was playing these games, man, they'd be mad at me, right? I was put in a difficult position, and I would process that with him, right? But this is what he's doing. He's finding a way to exert his control, his autonomy and influence. But when somebody is struggling with very problematic gaming, severe gaming issues, you just can't rip it out. They will become suicidal. It'll get worse. You'll have physical altercations. You'll have fights, and it will get more and more dangerous. You have to titrate it in collaboration with the parents, and you have to highlight this risk. Because when it's their sole relief, and they either lose their ability to experience that themselves, or it's pulled away from them, it will put them into that reckless mindset, and it will give them the fuel and the rage to maybe even act on those, when I was at the Shattuck, which is a forensic state hospital, 3 predictors or 3 components of suicidal ideation. Aloneness, which we see a lot in gaming, which is very different than loneliness. Loneliness is, nah, I miss somebody. I just got to go out and talk to my mom and dad, or I just got to go hang out with my friends. Aloneness is, I'm alone. I think it's the akin to when you lose a parent. You have to sit with the fact that when you need somebody, there's nobody there. It's scary. Or even if I wanted to reach out, there is nobody there. Nobody sees me. Nobody understands me. Then it's worthlessness. I'm a burden. There's no use. I just create more problems and headaches and heartache for people. I think everybody will be better off. There's no use in me living. I have no future. And rage. Rage is the fuel to enact suicidal ideation. And where a person, if you look at completed suicides, that there's a theme to the first person who finds them. It's like a big middle finger to whoever finds them. So rage is a big factor in it. So you'll see it. Likely the most problematic gamers have a tremendous amount of rage, which is the secondary emotion from an EFT point of view. It's a secondary emotion. The primary emotion is likely shame, is likely all those 3 indicators we talked about. So how do we look at violence during gaming, which is a little different because you can get more and more twisted. And what I was alluding to earlier, but never got to the point, was that the Columbine shooters, you see those videos of them out in the woods shooting the guns, but they also played a tremendous amount of Doom. Right, so you can see that sometimes the virtual world, and when I get to the different modes or the different presentations that people show during gaming that are connected to self-psychology, that I call it the violent aggressor mode. So that the theme while playing becomes more and more cold, becomes more and more twisted. And the video game itself becomes a venue in a vessel to get more and more twisted. And my main idea is I don't say these are the games we can play and these aren't the games. We can't. I only set one boundary is sexual material. That's an absolute no-go. And even in games like Grand Theft Auto, in which it could be found in there, you have to be aware of it and you have to assert that boundary. However, with violence, we can see games getting more and more twisted. And as I mentioned with that client, we could highlight it, and it often occurs without their awareness, right? Because they're trying to process this intense rage that is just bubbling under the surface, right? Of nobody understanding me, nobody caring and loving for me. Online relationships, a very tricky thing. Right? And we have to understand we can't go in with a bias and say, why don't you meet a real friend? And you'll hear that sometimes from parents. To be honest, I find myself grappling with this issue myself. Are online friends just as good as real friends? And I'm ping-ponging back and forth, right? And however, becoming a parent made me realize one thing. Now, the process of being held, the physical sensation of being held, cannot be recreated in the virtual world. And one may say the absence of that is a predictor of this type of behavior, in which not only is addiction, when it targets a hyperactivation of the dopamine system, is also the attachment system. So when you have a soothing, comforting, and loving family relationship, it calms and soothes that system that when addiction is at play, gets ramped up, right? And that there's a constant pursuit to keeping it up, right? Because there's an absence of secure attachment. Understand who they're playing with, right? And you know, you are human beings, you may have biases. But you know, I remember my old EPPP licensure. We can't give advice to clients. Sometimes we have to fight real hard to say, you know what, I don't think that person's a good friend. And maybe sometimes it is indicated. But we have to understand how much they know that person. Sometimes they can play with somebody on the other side of the world, know everything about, they know their gamer tag and know their favorite choices and plays within the games, and they can tell jokes, but they don't know their actual name. They don't know their family's structure and system. So you have to consider social fears and anxieties during gaming. Sometimes people want to really connect with others or want to find that good teammate, but have the same offensive, impulsive behaviors that make it hard for them to connect with people in school online, right? That they're either overly criticizing and they can't find someone to play with, or they don't know what to say in the chat. You can either talk through the microphone, right? Now a lot of people go onto Discord and sometimes all share their gameplay together, but or we'll talk. So you have to understand how either their social anxiety and fears are limiting their online connection, or right being alleviated. Right, the ability to just have your voice and your character present, and you have complete anonymity. You don't have to worry about another person observing your tone, your body language. All they hear is your voice, the tone of your voice. And so you can really keep your body and yourself hidden. So what supportive online relationships? I think that sometimes the more I take a negative view, I can think of another client that I've worked with, which he had real life friends from high school and from childhood, and he liked them, right? And coming from a Brazilian family and El Salvadorian, they culturally and generationally just could not understand it. They couldn't understand this whole gaming thing. But his real meaningful friends, in which he knew everything about what they were doing for college, for trades, and when he was having a hard time, he would go and call his friends in Canada. He really loved them, and they were good friends, and they really filled a void that his real life friendships couldn't have. Now, so you have to understand that that's a case in which, hey, I think it's really important for these parents to understand the meaningfulness of these friendships and encourage the connection of these people in real life and help facilitate that and nudge that. Address issues like cyberbullying, self-esteem, and conflicts from social media, as we see this quite a bit. And cyberbullying is something that we have to understand our clients' experiences of it, and it can be really harmful. And how in certain games, like Call of Duty is notoriously known for misogynistic, for racist, angry gamers. When I would play, I'd have to mute everybody. And I actually had to stop playing during the pandemic because all the kiddos that were staying home were really good. I would live for like 3 seconds. I was like, this ain't fun anymore. So check if they communicate via mic. Do they know their names? Like what is the quality of this connection? So gaming is a window into the community. So as you get to know a little bit about what they love to do, right? How can you translate this to the real world? So when they let you in, I call it a window into their gaming world. When they give you a window into that, it's like a window into their soul. Right? Animal Crossing may point or hint to the exploration of working with animals in some capacity, or farming. Minecraft, it's like engineering and building. And I also had clients who made pixel art. And my client made this massive, he spent 3 days tirelessly on a Dr. Phil green M&M, and it was fantastic. And it was a source of pride, right? Kind of silly that he spent 3 days, but he really wanted to create this. It can be artistic. It can be social, right? So Fortnite, if they love the emotes and the dances and they're doing it on TikTok and get them into dance. I had a client who loved being a PC simulators where he was the tech. He would get orders and he was running a full-blown business, right? He would get orders in and he would have to do it. He would have to pay his bills and he would have to look at his calendar when the rent is coming in. Street Fighter, martial arts. I had a client recently process how much he really liked the dance style of fighting, in which we discussed was capoeira, and the cultural and historical roots of that. And hey, maybe we should go explore it a little bit. So you have to use these observations to guide community engagement and skill development. So parents, I think the goal is to model flexible gaming. And when I shared that one case in which they had a very overly controlled, the father was a little just kind of on board with whatever the mother was saying. I mean, the mother scared me and intimidated me too, so I get it, you know. So he was like, I don't know. And the client was once playing a game. He goes, you know what? I played this once with my dad. And he was talking about how meaningful it was for him and how much he really enjoyed it and how much he really craved it, wanted it now. And really why he can't stand Max, because his dad needs to have a PC. But we talked about this, and I talked about it with the father and saying, hey, he really wants to play. I don't think till date he followed through, which I might say deserves another check-in on that, and is a sign of what this child craves and needs. It's not just gaming, it's the attachment and closeness and the love and the support and the adoring of his father with his skill in this game. Right? So, but when parents, they have either watch their children play or play with them, you need to model. You can't also be smashing controllers, right? You have to promote life skills, which is, you know, but before anything this happens, you need to validate and celebrate, right? The mode of watching a child play a video game is akin to a parent watching a child play an athletic event, right? You have to watch them. You have to point out what you notice and how good that play was. And if you look at Rocket League, the cars playing soccer, right? And there was this one client who was really good at it, and he would do these training camps and do it, and just like, you know, say I'm not really that good, and right, as he's simultaneously spinning through the air and doing air dribbles, which I couldn't do if I dreamed, but he had spent a tremendous amount of time. Parents could use that if they could validate that and view that as a significant source of accomplishment. They're going to want to feel that in other domains of life. So you first got to validate and say, hey, yeah, to be curious too. Curiosity and validation. If you just do those two things, you're going to be in a good place. You'll see change. It's not the only place they stay in. You got to challenge at times, but you have to talk about fair competition. And when parents are playing, there's this, I call it it's the good game mentality. Well, GGs, gamers. So after the game, people will say GGs, right? And so you have to promote fair competition. And if you lose as a parent, which is likely because your child or adolescent has significant more expertise and time spent playing, that you have to be like, oh, that was a good game. Wow, man, you're really good. You really got me. You know, and oh, you know, I lost that time. That's all right. I really had fun playing. Try to play again. You know, maybe I'll get you the next time. In emotional regulation, keeping your finger on the pulse of the affective and emotional interplay, and when things get elevated, to be that calming and grounding presence. To incorporate breaks and activities related to gaming. Again, translation. Right. So, can you hit the pause button, put the controller down? Can you tabletops or games, Warcraft, Dungeons and Dragons? You know, what we see is, you know, me myself, I'm kind of nerdy. That's why I love my nerdy clients. That they love D&D. And I've never played, but the more I got into it, I was like, if you guys wrote this whole thing down, you would have a novel. It was in the amount of time that goes into it, and through the character creation, loved it. But how do you encourage an offshoot, something that is somewhat related, right? Creative arts that involve family togetherness or the involvement in a separate. I love a good TV show. So you have to encourage flexibility by supporting children in playing their preferred games while in introducing games favored by others. That may be the parent themselves. You know, like the parent I'm thinking about has a whole collectible room, right? But his child is playing the favorite games of the time now, Roblox. He's playing with his cousins, and has noticed him screaming them left and right, and so he hates Roblox. I'm like, well, you have to try to get to know Roblox a little bit if you want to make some change here. You can't just get him to play the games that you love. And so you have to educate the nature about online friendships, which is, you don't want to just shut them out, but you have to help them. Parents need to help them understand their boundaries. Will this person come to your funeral? Will they give you a hug if you're sad? Right? Can you go out and go to the movies together? Right? And usually are the things that they want, and acknowledging they can't have that is the first step to either one, making it happen with the people that they want to make it happen with, or if not possible for whatever reason, how do you find those relationships in real life? Both the benefits of having this friendship, because sometimes you got a friend when you really needed it, and the impact of gaming on social and emotional well-being, right? Which is this is a tremendous source of creativity and social connection and pride, and they collect all these things, all that money that you spent on it, right? Which they don't understand why they just blew through this virtual currency. Now, I noticed that, and I work primarily in a community mental health setting. So I work with families who struggle with a tremendous amount of racism. They struggle with classism, intergenerational trauma, healthcare disparities, involvement with child welfare. We have untreated mental health conditions, or the whole family is in treatment. They have both the parent and 5 kids who are all in treatment with different therapists. But that when we look at parents starting to model flexible gaming behavior, as soon as they can can thoroughly process all the things they're upset with, and you start to inject things that get them curious about the potential benefits, they start to loosen up a little bit, right? And modeling that by playing together can be extremely helpful. It allows the child to be the expert, or the adolescent to be the expert. Children need to have the sense of influencing their parents, right? And streamers and content creation. Now, you need guardian approval. If your client is a video gamer and he wants to become a streamer, or she wants to become a streamer, or they do, that you have to, sometimes in session, we're not gaming. We're actually exploring YouTube. I have one client now who is actually in his early 20s, 22, I think, and he struggled in college, and his mother was monitoring his whereabouts on campus, but he loves Pokemon, and I play a free-to-play game called Pokemon Showdown, and you can see that he's on the spectrum. That is one of his restricted interests. He knows everything about all of the characters and everything, and I beat him twice. We played probably 100 times in the same game, and every time we start playing, I say, I'm ready for my daily my therapy whooping, right? And I said, maybe today's the day I'll get you. And he'll be kind sometimes. He'll be like, oh, I thought, you were doing pretty good there, and I often encourage him to be the expert and teach me how to play. But I could tell that he's getting sick of doing that, so sometimes I have to not do that. But, how do their favorite characters, or their creators, which now actually can be VTubers, which are, like GIFs or animations, that not the person themselves, right? But how do they interact with all this content, right? Does it inspire them? Is it someone, I know Hassan Piker, who also, delivered food and aid to Cuba, right? A very controversial figure, complex figure, right? But man, is he filled with a lot of rage, right? So who are they drawn to? I didn't know about Hassan Piker until my client showed me, right? So it takes a degree of freedom and curiosity to allow the therapy space not just to be all about CBT homework, or to be about what's going on in life. Because this client once, said, I could never be a streamer. And I said, why? I think he has the personality for it. And he says, Oh, there was this one kid in high school that was, and everybody bullied him terribly. You're gonna let that get in your way? I mean, these successful streamers, I think the joke's on us. But you have to use streaming as a potential creative outlet, which is the profitable use of the internet that the research has identified. In a system to use YouTube, which I mean, I've used it to build my deck. I've used it to learn how to use different Adobe softwares for book design, for video editing. You have to use YouTube, right? And you see this now more and more with the younger generation because all of the millennials, we were told you got to go to college, and now we're all drowning in debt and can't buy houses in the first generation that aren't doing better than our parents, right? And so they're like, I don't want to do what you did, be in a significant amount of debt. And why would I when I can just go find this information online or use AI? So if that's the case, then use it. Learn something. Learn OBS, the broadcasting software in which you need to put graphics on your stream, which you need to do this whole thing. Get them to learn and shift, right? You take the gaming as one activity and you find the ways to shift them slowly out of it. So, and if they want to create a channel, they're not going to do well. And then most people who start off don't do well. And you know that takes time to develop that, and it's really hard to do. And now the gaming world is saturated. There's a lot of content creators. So this is a lot of the same thing. So how do you use those tutorials to facilitate learning? And you know, you got to provide, sometimes you are helping them develop this, right? Again, you need parent approval because depending on what platform, it's more better for if you look at Twitch is a common streaming platform. We'll have, talk and sometimes a little bit more risque kind of streams. So, you know, you have to be mindful of it. Now, one of the biggest things is, do they already use it, right? And sometimes parents don't know what they're using and being exposed to, and I think it can be a helpful discussion. But YouTube in itself has a streaming function, which you could also do privately, right? Because once you start entering the virtual world, we'll get to it a little bit more in the technique. But you have to be mindful of maintaining therapeutic boundaries and a therapeutic lens. So when we're incentivizing gaming as a reward, that you have to make sure it's connected to their functioning in school, home, online, in the community, right? And you have to acknowledge effort. If you want to make the incentives work, you have to acknowledge the effort. And sometimes guided participation, which is a place in which when people use behavioral, either punishment or overcorrection, you know, cleaning, doing chores, or doing more, doing more things to kind of make up for what you did wrong, is that you need guided participation, right? And so are the parents, family actively involved with their school functioning? What do they need to connect with tutors? Do they need to connect with teachers? What are they doing at home? You know, how are they sitting having conversations online or watching them play online? And what are they doing to facilitate the community? And effort needs to be acknowledged. And when therapists use gaming to engage use, you know, parents sometimes limit technology. And, you know, it's a case-by-case basis. And you have to decide whether it's allowed in sessions. There's times in which I have to be on the parent side. And we sit there and we talk about how much we wish we could be gaming. And that often motivates the kiddos to do really well so they can get back. Yeah, it's fun to play with their friends, but it's actually even more fun sometimes to play with their therapist. So they will want to do better so they get to play with you. So permitting in-session gaming having the parents understand, like, I'm on board with this, and I'm wondering, you know, maybe if today you can allow them to play because this is an essential engine to our treatment and allows them to feel comfortable and safe. It allows them to open up. I kind of need it, right? Which really sometimes is a huge win for the client. One is it's showing that we have some influence here and that I'm maintaining this space. Yeah, so it's really a case-by-case basis. But sometimes you have to tell the parent that as soon as the session ends, I'm going to hand the control over. So behavioral strategies can curb parents' heavy gaming spending, right? So you could take all that money that is spent, and rather just giving it, at will or when requested, that you create a schedule as to when it is dispersed. Now, be aware of the inconsistent plans in the parental and child responses to this. Now, is it really helping? Is it making things worse? Where is things going wrong, right? Or what's going right, and how do we keep doing more of it? Physical exercise and movement. Gaming can be rather sedentary. Oh, not always though. You can look at Nintendo Wii that are very active, whether it's bowling. And you see it actually with the geriatric population. I love watching videos of elderly folks really getting into Wii bowling. And arcade games involve a lot of movement and involvement in the community. We have Dance Dance Revolution. I could think of a community venue that has all the gaming systems, old school, and mini golf. So you can go both do mini golf and play all of the old retro games. Or there's gaming cafes that host tournaments. I love, especially the competitive kiddos, to get into a tournament, right, and to play. But movement is crucial for emotional and physical well-being. It needs to be enhanced often. And sometimes you can, Pokemon Go, which you can play on your phone, get you out there and get you walking. There was another game that an adult actually shared with me. It's kind of like a massive capture the flag tied to landmarks, right? And they would team up with friends and other people in the community and go and we'll go and play this game of capturing the flag. So we need to get a little bit more movement, and we sometimes can use technology to do that. Hey, there's a lot of people go run on their treadmills and watch the news. So, it's being done, so why not use it? So now we're going to shift a little bit more into the meat and bones. That's the exciting part, I find. And what is this method called therapeutic gaming? Real life gaming was what I came up with in terms of the group, right? Once when we were teenagers, we'd all have to play the game in the same room. We'd have to pass off the controller, and sometimes you die too early, and then you give you another try, or you have a little fight over it and take the controller. But we'd all have to play in the same room, and sometimes play in a split screen, which kiddos nowadays are like, oh my, you have to share a screen? But playing in real life, this is a term, RLG, playing real life gaming. So it's like, how do we start to bring it in kind of a little bit of a retro feel where we can all game together in the same room? So the mission in philosophy, it's a paradoxical approach to behavior change. So we're harnessing the lure of commercially available video games in therapeutic ways. Similar to how fentanyl is used for pain control and sedation and surgery, very small amounts, targeted, right? That we have to harness it. That if you have a lot of it and too much of it, it could kill you, right? But under a guided professional, you could do surgery, right? And that's kind of what we're doing, psychosurgery, right? And we're helping them understand what's going on, what's underneath all of this, right? And when I was creating this idea, I was like, what are we gonna do? Put CBT in a video game? Who's gonna play that? Who's gonna, they had that, and it's never gonna do the trick like their favorite games will. And then I was thinking, I had this bright, brilliant idea, and then I find somebody in 1991, the year I was born, who was playing Mario with their clients in their office. Like, man, all right, you kind of got that. So what we see is, we have to counter traditional approaches that may stigmatize gaming behavior, right? That's the lure, right? I can game therapy, what, right? So, we have to be able to not get overwhelmed with our own biases or the parental biases or the need to make therapy therapeutic, which I help in supervision with young, doctoral interns and sitting with that. You're here for a year. A lot of these clients, if you make a change, you got to be in the game for 5-6 years. It's developmental support. You got to see them through time. But we want them in treatment, not isolated from it. And another thing to say, you don't get me. And so we want to target gamers' unconscious dissatisfaction with the real world. Pain, trauma, right? Mental health conditions, failure, social life. Nobody likes me, right? I can't make a friend. School failures, helplessness, family problems, and problematic gaming in and of itself. A lot of them know. And I've all pointed out while we're playing together. Yeah. Don't you think we should switch the game or the game mode? If you look at Battle Royale, you get one life unless your teammate buys your back, right? You get one life. Why are we gonna, if you die quickly, like I did in the pandemic, like, why not switch to a game in which you respawn? Nice rebirth, right? And we have to look at social isolation was one of my primary, focuses, which when you start to add a little technology in there, the definitions get a little murky, right? That although that they are physically isolated, that sometimes mentally and emotionally they feel really connected, and so everybody else around them sees them, but they don't see it themselves. They don't feel that way. Now, when we look at brain development, there is a protective social withdrawal during the transition into adolescence, right? Where they have a kind of an arrest, a little bit of perspective taking, and that they have to kind of go through, and self-connection, right? Because we're about to have a burst of it, right? So isolation often follows events and occurs naturally, developmentally. There was a type of isolation called unsociable. So that's the person who doesn't really need friends, but is, reading a book, is okay with it, right? To everybody else, I don't have friends, I don't have friends, right? But anxiety or academic struggles can serve, right, as something that the gaming world allows them to avoid. Not a problem. We have to encourage discussions about events before and after isolation, similar to what we do with the families, right? So that they can understand what role gaming played in connection with the events in life. Now, that you're starting to get your finger on the pulse. That takes time. And we're going to get to a little bit more in the technique, but you have to commit to supporting their exploration of new activities regardless the path they choose or the changes they make. Once you can thoroughly sit with them, and understand the offshoots for how they can take their passions and find ways to explore it in other ways. Now, flexible gaming behavior is what the goal is, right? What does that mean? What does it mean to have flexible gaming behavior, right? Although I was teetering on the craving and the tolerance and needing more time playing, and even in young adulthood, living with my wife early on, and I'd be playing until 2 in the morning. One more game, one more game, one more game, and then I'd be swearing like I had to, I was just, just swearing out loud, and she'd be like, "Is everything all right in there?" But you need communicative and supportive family dynamics, academic motivation and consistent attendance, stable sleep patterns and activities of daily living, involvement in community leisure activities, and less rigid gameplay and able to play different games, right? So when we start to game with our clients, we will know patterns, we will know rigidity, and you can either help highlight, now he's extremely frustrated here at this game. Everybody you play with is just like making you really mad, making you really angry. Right? I know you're really good at it, but right now it looks like maybe we got to switch the game mode. And if you can switch it a little bit, it can lead to a cascade of changes. And then I notice that sometimes clients they'll enter a nostalgic place where they want to play the games they used to. And and I have a client now. Yesterday we were really processing how he was going through. He never had the chance to complete the game. He likes to finish it all the way through, every aspect, every side quest, everything. But he also is an aspiring animator, who he actually came into treatment many years ago because of a shooting within the community. He was having trauma responses. And then we wrapped up, and then he, went back to school. But then he moved to the rural suburb of Western Mass, and then he was in school, and then there's Westover Air Force Base nearby, and he could, hear the propellers of the planes. He thought he was being under attack. It just triggered all of that trauma, and I had to come back in the scene and work with him, right? But he is someone who is really modeling that flexible game. His all A's and B's, right, is really starting to think about his identity development and transition into adulthood and who he is and who he wants to become. But so you got to reduce the rigidity of the gameplay. And you have to understand the benefits and the drawbacks. What are the benefits? What are the upsides? It's challenging, it's motivating, it helps manage stress. You can talk with friends, you can meet with new people. There's actually a lot of research coming out from Daphne Bavelier, who is a neuroscientist, where they looked at the visual spatial skills and abilities. And that actually, when researched, they had a whole group of college age students where they would give formal training in skill development for visual spatial skills, and they let other people play first-person shooters. And what they saw was actually stronger and more improvements in the group that played first-person shooter games than the group that was formally taught. So what are the emotional benefits? It's really important. An immense source of pride, joy, and excitement. But what are the drawbacks? Number one, poor sleep, excessive anger and rage, isolate from everybody, and mental inflexibility and rigidity, getting stuck, not wanting to try different games or activities in life. So mentalization theory is the primary theory that I use to understand this, which is a developmental theory that occurs from like 0 to 4, right? And you have to look early on. Stage 1 is, what is mentalization, right? It's not just theory of mind. This is not only, it occurs through developmental tasks that are completed. So first, it's self-regulation of stress, which is heavily influenced by parental responsiveness, right? So how children are able to be soothed by their parents, but also what we will get to a little bit later on, this is called intersubjectivity. Not just to soothe this distress, but understand even before the infant has the ability to speak, all of their cues, their intentions, their responsiveness. I could think of my wife in a wonderful video with my oldest son when he was just born, and she'd sit him up, she'd be doing the dishes, and she'd be singing Adele to him, and his eyes would be lighting up, and then he would vocalize it, and then she would encourage it, right? It's not just soothing distress, but it's trying to attend to the inner world of this child. She would always know when my child was sick 3 days before I would, right? And so then it's, once you can regulate stress, how do you shift your attention from yourself to other people? And then you have 2 phases. I put right here the pretend mode, which we alluded to a little bit earlier, right? Which, when you can see a lot with our games, they're kind of stuck here, where all of the affect that they're struggling with gets dissociated and split off from the self, right? And it has no bearing in their world, especially in the gaming world, and with reality. But before that, the precursor to the pretend mode is psychic equivalence, which when you look at a 2 to 3 year old child, is that their inner world, right, and their play, their wishes, their thoughts, right, matches external reality is supposed to match their subjective world. Or the inverse, which we see a lot of trauma occur from, is that the child's inner world corresponds with external reality. So it goes both ways, right? And if that reality is filled with really intrusive, intense, and painful, and traumatic, and intense experiences, it's what the analysts, when you look at working with people in adulthood, it's a dissociating experience, right? Your sense of self evaporates. The world of the parent is injected into you, and you have to hold on to it. There's too much to hold on to, right? So it becomes what the analysts refer to as the alien self. Or when you see problematic behaviors in the community, it's being projected out there, so they can maintain. They have to get rid of it. They have to expose everything that has been embedded into them. They got to toss chairs. They got to get into fights. They got to get it out so they can maintain connection with their goodness, right? That good object, self-object. So that psychic equivalence occurs before pretend mode. And then this all is kind of tied together by accurate and empathic affect mirroring by parents who will help the child with regulating those affects, understanding in connection with social relationships. And what is difficult to do, is that sometimes reality and intentions that reality and appearance aren't always the same thing, right? So mentalization involves a lot of work around intentions, motivations, beliefs, right? But so from 0 to 4, you successfully negotiate the psychic equivalence in the pretend mode, right? That play helps strengthen a child's sense of self, right? How many times, I do forensic parenting evaluations where I go to observe in the DCF office, and they want to just like not play, and sometimes really struggle with understanding why play is important. Now, sometimes with really traumatized parents who, may or may not be in their own treatment, we know that play opens up everything, right? So sometimes when I was observing a parent who was trying to play with her daughter and she had her own sexual abuse history and had a naked doll that they were dressing up, and the child had to go to the bathroom and she was dissociating looking at the doll. So sometimes play is really hard for them. But when you get this in a secure attachment and you get all of this reflective processing from parent to child in a safe, secure, where all emotions are okay and understood their function, right? And the cause and effect of behaviors and the accountability, both from the parents or the parents when they do something that the child's emotional well-being means everything. That, how many times I have lost my cool, which I need to say, that I could tell that really made you feel scared and upset. And daddy needs to work better, taking some deep breaths. And then we practice it, co-regulation. But then, so mentalizing can occur, right, after all of this is achieved, right? And then you can see it later on in life. So it starts early. And where we come in is often late, right? So what we're trying to do is restore that, to understand these relationships and build a secure attachment, right? And to mentalize themselves and other people. You have to try to understand what's going on. So for the group goals, now the ideal group amount is, I find around probably 6 to 8. Right? You don't want to have the group too big. It's really hard to manage all those different gameplays. But what we're going to use gaming to bring people into treatment and to connect with other people who love it. And there's specific styles of how gaming is used in the session. And both, which is a little different from the gaming to the individual. But in the group model, I developed a whole workbook where the first half of the session, you do the therapeutic gaming. In the second half of the session, they do character development. So I took the hero's journey and developed where they get to create their own hero, right? So a superhero, their own character, kind of like Dungeons and Dragons. And we go through all the villains, the allies, and I embed mentalization skills throughout the process. And in that same developmental trajectory. So, which you have to understand, what are the ways that you regulate your stress? How do you know how stress is interfering with your functioning? I use a nice Wi-Fi model, right? When you have no Wi-Fi, you can't do anything. You're frustrated. Even if you want to play, you couldn't, right? And that means you got like no energy. You're overwhelmed. You're not in the world. You got one bar, like it's kind of, it's so frustrating. You're out there and you're playing your game, but like it is so laggy, you can't even do well. So you eventually stop playing. Go back to Charlie. And the next one up is, you're playing, you're doing good, and you have minor snags, and then you have a really strong connection. Right? Well, that's where we want to get people, where they're feeling that complete flow, so to speak, right? Where they're operating, they have the ability to manage that stress, understand their emotions, and themselves and other people, and they're functioning well with no problems. That's where we're trying to get to. So in the group, when we alternate this, we'll get into the schedule, but social is where everybody plays the same game together. Now, it's up to ideally the group composition and the facilitators and whether or not you have those games identified. I always thought it's kind of, interesting in a social skill experiment to negotiate it, which it can get pretty tricky, right? So you may have to balance it. You may test it and then have a handful of games that are free to play, cross platform. Brawlhalla is an excellent one, which is kind of like a Super Smash Brothers, where you can create a private lobby and everybody can play together. So everybody plays together. And then solo is that window, right? Where everybody has to sit and watch this one person give a little insight into who they are. They go through all the skins that they collected, all of their achievements, and they watch and play, and people ask questions. And partner, so you either you have to keep your awareness into who likes similar games. You can pair them up together, or if people want to pair together. There's a lot of freedom and choice in this, and it's within the facilitator as well as the group composition. Now, the partner play is where you're assigned a slot, right? In that slot, you guys get to both play together while the whole group watches. So this is an example of the schedule, all right? So, the first session, everybody gives a little window into their world and you go through. Now, the next session, as you can see the character creation on the right, this is the, chapter that is the workbook that is associated with it. Then everyone plays together, then the partner, and then the social, and then it's mapped out. And you kind of have to know this kind of after the first session and everybody shows himself. You have to go back to the drawing board and kind of plot it out. You can randomize the partner. Now, gaming observation questions. I was thinking about, how do we guide this? It's similar to a reflecting pool. If anybody remembers in graduate school, I remember it was a supervision class, right? Where we had one person who was the therapist and the other person who was the supervisor, and everybody sat around in the chair. And after after the two did their thing, everybody stopped. They reflected on what they did, and everybody else shared their comments. We recreate this process. Now, you want to ask questions about in-game action, virtual world, and between the gamers. So why did you choose that weapon, character, card? What made you go to that area of the map? A lot of sometimes in those battle royales, people will either drop into a very hot zone, right? They're good and they want to warm up. They want to get going, or sometimes people drop into an isolated part of the map, right? And they want to gather everything they want to play with, so that when it's time for the battle, they're well equipped. So why did you choose to be stealthy, reckless, fast-paced, strategic? What was your plan for that match? Did that go how you intended, how you meant for it to go? What were those surprising moments? Did your plan turn out how you imagined it? Player reaction questions. So, what did you guys think or feel when you guys lost? What was your opponent's or partner's best move? How was it for you to partner up with your partner? Did you learn any new strategy from them? What were you thinking or feeling after playing with your partner? Now, these are process-oriented social questions. However, you can also apply this to in-game actions. What did it feel like when your partner gave you the ammo that you needed? What was it like when that person backed you up? Or those are all good moments, but sometimes they're not the teammate they need to be. Maybe we want to talk about that. So, everything is an exploration of what's going on in the virtual world versus between participants. Now, for the individual therapy, now social is a little different, right? So you're an individual. So the client plays online game with others. And now, if they like to have their microphone, you have to direct them to mute their microphone, that this is private, right? And so they can't hear in-game chatter. You want them to mute not only their microphone, but all the microphones in the game, right? You don't want to hear them hearing them. You don't want, and it can be problematic if they're playing with other people and they just have their mute on mic and they can hear everything they're saying. They're not fully present. So you kind of have to set that boundary. But I think it's still valid. If all of that is well-boundaried and mindful, you can actually see how they interact with the world at large in real time while maintaining anonymity and confidentiality. So that's really essential. So you have to have them mute their mic, get out of any group that they're playing with, right? But you can see them play with other people. Now, solo just is the same as the group, right? Which is the parent watching the child play an athletic event. So they get to showcase their favorite game while the therapist watches, guides, and reflects, and then it's the partner version of individual therapy is where you join them and you play them. It's great when you can find a game that you can find a private lobby where it's just you two, right? But you have to manage boundaries, such as for yourself, is I can think of clients who want to play a certain game with me and want me to buy the game, right? Which I would start with a hard no, and man, maybe I catered for one, but then I realized he was just like every session to come back, and I said, well, I think we need to buy. We have to pause the buying the games. I noticed that you're switching a lot. If you're going to find a game for me to play, let's play free to play games, right? So you have to, manage those boundaries as they're fluid, right? Just like even if you're sitting with somebody in your office, they're fluid. It gets a little bit more fluid in the virtual world, and you need a constant awareness of it and a kind redirection. But you have to search for a way to play together. And technological difficulties always pop up. I can think of a client where sometimes the entire session was about negotiating a technical difficulty, but we would stay committed to it. And maybe we'd have like 2 minutes of actually playing together. But the progress in itself is how we were both resolving this problem together, and we were tolerating the distress in it and talking about it, and then problem solving. But so you have to play. You're going to play with them. Now, I noticed that gaming is a mode of connection, a space to develop a shared language, right? That our clients sometimes, I notice, you look at those different styles, and not only the clients, me myself, right? I notice that since having children, I haven't picked up a video game controller, right? And I'm a little bit more resistant to it myself. But the client's sitting there saying, like, I really want to play with you. So I had to acknowledge that and overcome that and play with them. So I really like the more, of course, where I am developmentally, I like the more parental one, where you get to kind of watch and let them guide you through everything, and you can talk about it and you can reflect. But what the client desires can, for that style of gaming can reflect different unmet needs, right? So if they really just they don't want to play with you, and they really want you just to watch, what does that say about the parental need for the confirmation of their greatness? Right? So we have to, what happens when, all they want to do is just play with you. And so as you shift through all these different modalities, that you can see that a rigid pattern will emerge, sometimes fueled by the client, sometimes fueled by us. And so we have to be aware of that. And, you can point out the patterns. I pointed out to the client, he finally found a game that he played for more than one session. I know, and I pointed out to him. He's like, you know what? Yeah, I didn't even notice that. And the more we negotiated this together, now when he finds games, he makes sure that they're free to play, right? And there was a time in which the time I caved about the game, it wasn't compatible for Mac, right? And so you have to highlight these patterns. You got to explore what it means and encourage the switch agreed upon. So if there's a lot of the watching them play going on, you got to say, hey, I really want to play with you. How can we do that? And also if they're just playing with other people, right? You in that social capacity, you can say, what about campaign modes? Sometimes clients will hit different bosses or levels or achievements that they're struggling with, right? Or they will get into the offline mode, right? And they wait for the latest drop of the newest content, right? But you have to watch their evolution, their growth within this game, right? And you can, if you start with them early on and figuring out the game, they're not very good. But by the time you see them 3-4 weeks down the line, they're already at level 70. It gives you a real-time moment of impressive growth. So therapeutic gaming styles can function, if you look at object relations theory and self-psychology. And I alluded to this a little bit earlier, solo gaming and watching them play, it has the idealizing self-object need, and where they themselves can be omnipotent and powerful, right? And the expert, right? Or the merge yourself object needs, which is like a hug, right? They need to be hugged, right? And which means playing together serves more of a twinship function, similar to a sibling, a friend, or even a parent. And social play offers relational themes and dynamic reflecting their interpersonal world. Now we have to observe and explore these gaming modes. Now, the following themes are concerns, and they offer insight to the unspoken struggles experienced by the client. Now, observing the clients during gaming sessions can reveal the problematic patterns that hinder their entire life, but they really start to lose the enjoyment of the benefit of the game, right? Which gives you an opportunity to explore the underlying issues. What you see when somebody's failing a lot is an intolerance for loss. Parents may exhibit one or multiple problematic gaming styles, with some approaches being more prosocial and creative than others. And encouraging greater flexibility is a ongoing theme. Actively engaging can promote more prosocial gaming behaviors and enhance self-awareness. So if you're in Fortnite, one time we discovered it was actually an event where all the guns were put away, and we were dancing to a DJ, and it was during Halloween. We would hop into a porta potty, put on an outfit, and pop out. And we were riding ATVs together, right? And riding around on witch brooms, right? It's fun. It's fun not only for the client, right, but for the therapist as well. And when problematic gaming modes arise, they serve a valuable indicator, right? So these modes are, while we're working in session with our clients, if you need to write a session note, you have to make this clinical. So you got to be mindful of the different affective, behavioral, psychological themes. The narcissistic defense mode, they're hyper competitive, they love violent action shooter games. They want to best everybody, but they really cannot. They have a compulsive need to win. They're reactive, they're rigid, right? They prefer working alone, right? You see a lot of anger and rage, and they cannot lose, right? So they'll rage quit in competitive modes of gameplay. Sometimes you have just ones that don't affect your ranking. And then you have competitive modes that do affect your ranking. If they're playing with somebody, I've seen people turn off their consoles because they know that that other person won't get the points, right? And they won't get the loss. Or the rage quitting. I always point out rage quitting gently and humorously. Yeah, looks like, yeah, well, we just rage quit right there, huh? We start to bring to the surface a little bit about the inability to tolerate the loss, right? And mental states, they're very sometimes defensive, arrogant. The blame is shifted outwards to other people, right? Even when they just get bested, they're cheating. They have their aimbots, they have software, right? Or they can't just accept being bested by another person. I mean, sometimes I mention that. I don't know. Looks like you just got the best of you in that moment. They have tough exterior covering significant insecurity and vulnerabilities, right? So there's a narcissistic trait, a narcissistic injury, right? And what does that mean socially? They're difficult to play with. They trash talk. We'll see this in the group in group settings. That really needs to be monitored and redirected and identified and processed. And generalizations are all nudes, right? Or they're sitting upon their throne. And they're doing great when they're grandiose. Grandiosity and narcissism is being properly fed, right? So the family goals: increase sensitivity to the child's disappointment and hurt in life, right? So if you fail and it is followed with shame, right, it's too much to tolerate. So they're like, I can't lose again. I can't do that again. And when they do great, they get the affirmation and confirmation they've always desired, right? And you can lose connection with oneself, but how do you start to bring about unconditional acceptance and support regardless of achievement in life too? Grandiose driven mode. You're always driven to unlock or buy the newest items or technology and attain higher ranking and status, right? Obsessive collecting and buying. One time I had a client where he had a bunch of skins in Fortnite. Where it's just combing through them all. And I said, and he was just going really fast. He was going really fast. And I said, whoa, oh, you got tons of stuff here. Let's slow down and look at it all. And as he slowed down, he was like seeing things he's never seen before. He forgot that he had it, right? When we work with people, sometimes we have to connect them with the parts of the self that they forgot was there, right? So he forgot that he had it, which is in itself a mindfulness. Let's slow down the pace. Let's like mindful eating. Let's sense this. Let's look at it. I like that axe. Oh, that's a funny emo. Oh, let's go see it in action. Affect is they have excessive excitability and they need to maintain it, right? And so that's the getting the newest of all the things, right? That they're really scared of boredom, which I think is a proxy for depression, right? That they need a constant state of excitement and they need to feel like they're the best. It's very close to narcissistic, but a little less abrasive. So the mental state is image focused. They have a low self-esteem and it's just like never satisfied. Social, they like to boast about the newest items or tech, and this has kind of gotten the group into some murky waters, right? Where the grandiose driven client could speak down or ridicule others for what they don't have, which needs to be intervened with right away. Intense needs for parental confirmation of greatness. They find activities to build connection within that relationship that are not centered around materialistic needs. Sometimes it's easier to make your child happy and you just throw them a Roblox card, right? And when you see this dynamic at play, when there isn't enough connectedness within that relationship and it's creating a void within this relationship, where either playing allows parent space to decompress or distance to do their own thing, when buying things is the only way in which that child can be seen, it creates a bit of a monster. And I've had to work with clients who use that coercion and that fear, who will demand it, and they demand that they are owed this. You see a lot of
Excuse me,
disruption.
Dr. Sago.
What's that?
I'm so sorry, excuse me, Dr. Sago. We know that the presentation was until 1, but if someone needs to hop off, it's okay. We're gonna be here and we're gonna have the recording and we will send also the slides just to let everyone know.
Oh, fantastic. We have the comfort-seeking mode, cooperative role-play games, desire to be social and find connections. What you see in the gameplay is a low level of competition, high fantasy, building, or creative endeavors. They're typically anxious, a little bit more depressive, easily excited. They desire comfort and connectedness and twinship. Now, for the mental state, they often feel unloved and socially undesirable. They have a negative sense of self, poor self-image and self-other boundaries, and limited self-soothing. Socially, they idealize the online friends for their affection, their attention, their wisdom, and they rely on others emotionally. For family goals, we got to facilitate conversations about online friendships. The violent aggressor mode, which we discussed a little bit earlier on. They are consumed with violence, sadism, and twisted vengeance. The gameplay involves almost a dissociative rage where they're numb to horror, transient, right? Sometimes it's not all the time, but you could see that sometimes they only want to be the killer in Dead by Daylight. They're self-absorbed, and there is a desire, a sadistic desire to inflict pain, and unenthusiastic and calculating. I could think of a client who we started to play Grand Theft Auto, and it started just like shooting anybody that he saw, in which I pointed out, hey, whoa, jeez, what are these guys? What did they do to deserve it? What happened today? Well, it must have been a stressful day. And he regained awareness of what he was doing and entered a race, a little bit more prosocial. But they're very self-absorbed sometimes, and you can see antisocial traits where they push others away or shun contact or only find people who can feed their image or share in that violence and rage. So we have to ensure bullying and interpersonal conflicts are addressed systemically and individually, increase awareness around the ways that the child and family sees the world as a hostile place, or ways in which they contribute the world to being a hostile place, and fulfill the child's need to be soothed and safe, which may be far away from their idea of what they need. We have to decrease the hyperfocus. You got to meet them with the horror. I mean, I always say I can't tolerate it very much, and they love getting me scared. But then we have to shift away from those themes a little bit. The narrative escape. This is where they love the campaigns and storylines, the development, immersive time distortion, high fantasy, creative, and sometimes can be historically placed. And you have changeable affect. This is where we're starting to get into a little bit more normative, reflects the storyline or character, in a curious exploration of worlds, the desire to progress in these storylines. Can be cooperative, but usually it's a social thing, and it's usually a solo thing. So you have to find ways. Sometimes they like their character more than they love themselves. Ideal versus actual self discrepancies, which you see in depression. Right, that they start to love their characters more than they love themselves. So we have to allow them to love themselves. Right? We have to help facilitate that and provide belonging and sameness with others, find opportunities to connect that. So we have person-centered play therapy, psychodrama, and intersubjectivity. Winnicott identified the concept of a transitional space where the internal world of the client is blended and melded with their external world, but also intersects with the therapist's self, which is, you know, the little insights into the therapist's inner workings and how the therapist traverses that and presents their genuine self. So that the gaming world is a transitional space. Just like therapy and play is the space in between the client and therapist is viewed as intersubjectivity, which roots in early preverbal attachment relationships and attunement of the parent to the child's inner and external world. Reciprocal interplay that enhance warmth, connection, mirroring, and soothing distress. So Winnicott was a huge believer on the centrality of play in the development of the child's sense of self. Dr. Dan Brown, in his attachment research, was exploring intersubjectivity. And when we do our play therapy techniques in the virtual world, right, it's not just translating what they do, right, or repeat. It's a deliberate reproduction. It's mirroring. It's amplification and embellishment. So what does it mean to do that in session? When you express awe in their expertise, you amplify pain when the gamer dies, and you embellish close calls or stressful situations. You use sound effects. I love singing "We Are the Champions" to play with pace and playfulness. Right? You have to exude curiosity and ask questions until you understand the game. Right? And you focus attention on the gameplay. You fight through loud sounds or nauseating visuals. People building in Fortnite can make me nauseous. Ask to adjust the audio visuals if you need to turn it up, turn it down, or they'll be deeply attuned to your presence. This is really important. When you think that you can't just be on your phone, right? You can't be doing other things. They're monitoring whether or not you're watching, right? And so you have to mirror their behavior to highlight avoidance. So sometimes when I'm playing somebody, when they're losing in a rather abrasive way, right? You can highlight it, and you have to exude that good game mentality, healthy winning, And, you have to enjoy playing with them over results. I love doing the art of losing, which is how convincingly you can lose. When somebody is losing in life, what are you going to beat them in Uno, in an online version of Uno, right? So you don't want to recreate their life problems in session. Sometimes it may be unavoidable, but sometimes when somebody's really grandiose, I like to catch them when they're sleeping. So I'll best them, and I'll point it out that, hey, I know you're good, but everybody has their moments, right? Sometimes you got to do it to temper the grandiosity. Well, and when you play with your client as a teammate in one-on-one lobbies, let them teach you, and you encourage their patience, and it takes as long as it takes for you to learn. But you want to give them best of everything, right? So if you get separated on the map, you got to make it your mission to be unified, or you mirror that, and you go and you play on another part of the map, and you express how much you really wish that you were together fighting alongside or exploring alongside your client. You got to revive them. If it's an action game, you got to revive them at all costs, right? If they have something you like, you give it to them. You have to search and find them in the map and call for a reunion, right? So you have to, if you're a gamer, you might enjoy playing, but sometimes the pressure to focus on real life can be immense. When I was developing this, I was working with a client, and he was like, "Can we play it?" And we were in the office. He's like, "Can we play a video game on that PC?" And I said, "That's only for work." And then I stopped myself and I said, "That's against everything that I'm researching and believe in." And as soon as we played together on my laptop, he played a game, Fireboy and Water Girl, which you both can play on the same keyboard, where one uses the arrows and the other uses the WASD, and you need each other to make it through these little puzzles. And he was sitting there, he's reflecting. He said, "You know what? I love this. I played this game when I was feeling all alone, like when I had nobody." And he was the one that was controlling both characters. And for that moment, he had somebody to actually play with. So as soon as you relinquish that and you allow it to happen, and if you focus too much on it being therapeutic and talking about what's going on in life, you get away from the mission. And if you play and you maintain focus on the styles of gameplay and the therapeutic gaming, the sense of the reflection on life will emerge. But sometimes you do, right? If they can't allocate their attention, sometimes you want to reflect while they're playing. Sometimes they can't do that, right? You have to test their abilities to do that. So sometimes you have to carve out time before or after the therapeutic gaming to talk about life, right? But that pressure always make it therapeutic, especially with this being video games, right? If you got to keep your clinical focus, right, and your involvement, but you have to build really. The goal is to draw connections to real life and reflection, because how the themes that they're playing in the game are very reflective of what's going on in their life. So you have to build up an archive of previous experiences so you can point back to, well, remember when this happened, right? Which highlights your attunement, your attention. And if you have to, if they want to show you something, you have to let them show you. When I work with parents, is that there's ideal places to end a game, and when you end that game, they need to be ready. So sometimes when you just turn it off, it's like crushing. I was just about to do something, but sometimes they want to really show you something. Sometimes you can be bored out of your mind and you're ready to leave. You have to be there till they show you it. And if they keep pushing those boundaries, you have to afford time towards that buffer in the end to say, all right, time is near. I need you to show me what you're going to show me here. Like, show me the finale. What's the finale? Not affording that can lead to an empathic rupture. So while they're playing, I've noticed so many themes in this list can just keep going on. Abandonment, right, where they can never find the right teammate. Rugged self-reliance and distrust of others, right? And impulsivity behaviorally in the game, where they're making stupid decisions, that affect them, or breaking the controllers. Unfairness and feeling unseen and unsupported. Isolation. Inaccessible relationships that focuses on their needs and wishes. They often they'll only find a friend if somebody plays the same game that they play, which is not the way the world works. Oppositionality and self-destructive behavior, right? Driving the cars off the bridge, right? Rescuing, limited distress tolerance and denial of failures, rage quitting, and rigid viewpoints of self and other blame, where they only blaming other people, or self-loathing and deprecation. I play with clients, oh, I'm stupid. Oh, that was stupid. How could, just absolutely hammering themselves. And we point that out and discuss it because they know that's floating around their head in every other experience in life. And when gamers love to play, they sometimes have little awareness of flow and peak performance, that when you can facilitate in session a certain vibe, right, that is grounded in mindfulness, right, and being focused in the moment. And when things get, how many times I've followed kids in battle royales where the victory hour was real near, and I said, oh, you're close, just a few more left, stay focused, right, stay calm, right, and then they dial in, and then they win. So you have to find unbeatable stages or levels in games and help them achieve it, help them understand this peak performance. That you need just enough adrenaline and anxiety, not too much, right? You got to help them dial it in, right? And they'll really achieve, and both in the game, and it's an achievement in therapy as well. So you got to teach them the idea of no mind, or the Buddhist not knowing mind. You got to stay present in the moment, calm during the fire. This flow state can be translated to peak performance in school, to overthinking that is used in many different contexts of life, right? So this can be used, and you can reference it. Remember that time we were playing that game, right? And you started getting really overwhelmed with it, what everybody else was doing, and then had you relax and focus into yourself. Look what you achieved. You can do that in other areas of life. So in Martha Stark's therapeutic modes of action, one is helping the client understand the inner workings of the mind, traditional psychoanalytic. Self-psychology is number two, which is emotional validation. And we want to help make the connections to real life, right? And when they have experiences in life that are new and are different, where they're achieving like they are in the virtual world, right? You can make parallels and connections. And the third is the relational processing in session between you and the client. So in summary, the online world is a vast place. They get instant access to all information they want, and solitude and isolation needs to be assessed. That even within that solitude and isolation, they be connected with somebody from another part of the world. You have to be, gaming is the antidote to aloneness and the antidote to any problem for that. It allows them to avoid negative affect and anxiety, problems, life dissatisfaction, and stress. So breaking that social isolation requires a safe place in a relationship to facilitate flexible gaming, which is, yeah, this is fun, but what else is there? Meaningful relationships online and in person can be a crucial marker that determines the degree of social isolation, and that this intervention is highly adaptable, right? And based on the clients and based on the current trends that are going on. And as long as you maintain focus on your ethical and confidentiality boundaries, and you have the ability to monitor that, then and you can explore these themes, and you can do some play therapy techniques, and you will process life when the time is right. Sometimes they are not ready to talk and want to play, so you play, right? Even teenagers. The more you try to force them to talk, the more they're going to retreat angrily and oppositionally, right? So you got to stay paradoxical, stay fluid, and this can be used both individually and within a group. And it's open for everybody to put their little spin on it, right? That we want to research this more in depth, and so you can add your own creative spin and find different styles for it. Maybe you've encountered different themes, and so it's up for interpretation and creative spins. Well, and here are some of the resources. Well, sorry for going over. I thought I had the timing correct. Now we're going to 2. But if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer any of them. You're absolutely welcome. Thank you for being here. So Amalia, Isa, is there any questions? Does anybody have questions? What's the next step?
It looks like in the Q&A section, there are 4 questions.
All right, what do we have?
We have, are there ways to ensure confidentiality using video games as a therapeutic modality? How do we ensure that PHI is protected?
Yeah. No, I think we alluded to it. Maybe that was a little bit earlier, but you have to. Um, Now, when you're in the group modality, you really have. I know that they're all going to want to play with each other. So they're going to want to exchange gamer tags, but I encourage to do it at the end of the group. Now, the one time which there was a little leeway, they played outside of the group session, and there was like one client's group of friends with the other client's group of online friends feuding, and it was problematic. So you got to urge for them to wait until the end to exchange their gamer tags. But when you're playing individually, it comes with, I mean, usually nobody puts their real name, right? So that in and of itself is de-identified. But as long as they mute their mic, right, that they control access to hearing other people. If there's a chat in game, now you want to encourage them to stay present with you, right? So confidentiality comes with how you have them mute their mic, how they if you meet with them and they're actively playing, have them just be present with you. Can you get out of that group, right? Can you mute those mics? And so within the group setting, it's primarily making sure that nobody gets each other's gamer tags and plays outside of the session, right? And just like it's just like confidentiality in person individual therapy, it's something that needs constant awareness and processing. And when things emerge, you have to be aware of it and redirect it, right? Or to be mindful of it, right? As long as it's just you and them. Other people from the world could be in there, right? But if they're not talking to them or they're not listening into what you're saying, you have maintained that boundary, right? So it can be a little blurry at times, right? Just like can be in any other context, right? You have to maintain that mindfulness, that awareness, that redirection, and muting the mics, right? Getting out of chats is huge.
Another question is, how can we as a society create safe spaces for teens to feel like they're not alone? And then it says, for example, what about having a gaming club at the library?
Yeah, I know that it exists many other places. That sometimes there's gaming clubs in school. There's now gaming clubs at the library, or sometimes they have systems available at the library where there's a therapeutic mentor they can go, or there's community events. Now, the group modality is typically used for clients where it's hard for them to just go out there and do it, right? They may either require a mentor, right? Or they require the group therapy to learn how it's done, and then a mentor can help them, or a parent can help them connect to that resource. I think that although the group modality has a very therapeutic workbook, I think the power is in the gaming. So, you can just facilitate it and it will be therapeutic. I encourage the development. That's what it's called, just like you just use the social gaming piece. Probably a little less reflection on it, right? But yet, even if you do it in a library, right, that you have to make it less therapeutic, right? I mean, there's more people in the library. People are coming in and out. So you just make it about facilitating the game and making sure that things kind of flow and function in healthy, adaptive ways. That just like you would in group therapy, you have to do some redirection, but it is more like a club, but this model itself helps people get to that point. But I encourage it. I think it's great, whether it's through schools, libraries, gaming cafes, in the office, or through telehealth.
Perfect. Thank you. The other question is, how do we hold game creators and companies accountable for gaming addiction? Similar to opioid legislation, technology in general, including social media, are created to keep people, especially teenagers and youth, addicted.
Yeah, yeah. Just like Amazon, just like any TV show. That that there are, I think, I mean, there's a lot of parents who are bound together to a fight Roblox. There are which are making headways, which they're having authentication. I mean, if you're looking for a social justice lens, I think there are plenty of organizations, sometimes professional and parents, that are going after them. You have to do that in a legal way and through taking your stance. Now, it's one of those things where it's so profitable, right? And it is so ubiquitous that we're really trying to reel it back. Um, but we see people doing it. I think there are opportunities for people to fight that good fight. Now, what I have to say, which is, although there's a lot of people that are addicted, there's a lot of people that are able to model that flexible gaming behavior. So I think it's really hard just to say don't use that because everybody else might be using it. And so sometimes just not doing that further isolates them. I think the question is much more complex. And it's easier for somebody to not get hooked up into that when they have the right relationships in their life, right? That from before they even start playing the video games, every time the TV is turned off, that you sit with it, right? Process it. You don't turn it back on, right? You help them emotionally regulate, and then maybe you play, or maybe you go. It involves heavy involvement in monitoring parents from birth, right? Just like it would for anybody who's struggling with, if you look with people who are struggling with opioid uses, a lot of people describe the subjective experience of it feeling like a hug or a warm blanket. So when you have that it's never the addiction itself. I know Gabor Mate talks about this quite a bit. It's the trauma, right? That the substance used eases that pain. So, I mean, you could go after the big corporations, or through more class action suit, where you can find ways to protest and you can find ways to go right to the top. However, my approach is to work with families, right? And to help them understand that the gaming, yes, it's the game that is addicting, but it's everything else that's going on that isn't being attended to and addressed, right? So that's pain within the family relationship, right? That is stress, that is trauma, it's depression, it's anxiety, right? And aloneness. There's all these other factors that, even for my most problematic of gamers, that once they start to work on this and get into a more secure attachment, there's a lot of kiddos in which all we've done was therapeutic gaming, and now we're just doing straight up therapy, right? So it allows them to get less rigid and stuck and addicted, right? And if you help them understand everything else in a more complete view, a relational, a dynamic view, and to get to at the underlying core issues, then and you help explore and enhance new modes of connections within the therapeutic space and within the community, the gaming is just not as fun. They want to do other things. They want to get to a more developmental, normative track, right? And they have better control over it. They can feel how better their life is when they sleep well. Right? They do better in school, and you can use gaming as a reward after you get everything you need done. It hits differently than when you know you got a bunch of homework assignments to do and you're just gaming to get away from it. When you use it as a reward, now you can just enjoy it. But I think that you can go straight. You can. There's many families and individuals and organizations that are doing that. I don't think they're gonna. I don't think they're gonna make things like they're. I mean, they're making social media accounts that are. They're trying, right? But when you're tackling these giants, they are so motivated by greed and profit, right? And we need people who are going to go at that legally and through protesting and activism. But what I just shared is a method how to start with one person within one family who's embedded within a community. And when you're working with more people throughout time, that creates a ripple, creates a wake, right? And you help people get on more flexible gaming. I know just some people believe that the answer is to get rid of the gaming. I think that it's explore those underlying problems and to help understand how gaming was used to soothe that pain, just like the use of fentanyl or heroin makes them feel comforted and soothed, which was completely absent in the traumatic, disorganized attachment in childhood. That the substance gives them a feeling, just like that controller gave me a vibration and hit my target. It's a feeling, right? It's feeling hugged, feeling loved, feeling safe. That's the goal without using gaming, without using the substances. But even if you're treating people who are really in deep with opioids, Suboxone is used. You have methadone that is used, which will keep them alive and safe and hopefully titrate down. It's the same thing with gaming.
All right, our last question is in the chat. It says, my 2-year-old grandbaby is talking about Roblox every weekend that I see her. Should I be worried? I thought that that game had phased out a while ago.
Oh yeah, um, 2 year. I don't know. I think it's young. Um, I would explore So are the parents gamers? How do they know about it? Two's young. Daycare. What's the exposure socially to it? Um, you know, for my own children, I want to delay it. They sometimes when we have them working with early intervention, and they'll get on the laptop, or when we go to a birthday party, there's like arcade games. I'm playing. My oldest really wants to play video games. Here I am, really kind of encouraging it, but I want to delay it as much as possible. Roblox, when you see it at 7 years old, that then kids really can get into it. Um, I mean, there's a lot of games within Roblox. I think it all comes down to parental supervision, um, and that they're very. I mean, it's the same thing with TV shows. So I mean, my kids love the Lego Avengers, and when they start to get a little bit aggressive, right, and when they're acting out and they're playing out their Avengers, we got to take a break from the Avengers, right? So I think it depends on the parental involvement and how it is discussed. But I want to know where this came from. 2 years old is very young. So where are they getting introduced to it? I think they're way too young. 2 years old is way too young. So that's the time to. But it depends on how. It sounds like it's if it's been played once, the box is open, right? So as soon as that box is open, it's very hard to close it back up. And if you try to force it closed, then it's gonna be hard, right? So you gotta join them in the box, understand how it got open, wonder what it's like in the box, right? And together step out of the box and close it together. But I would want to know how they got introduced and what source. Is it socially? Is it within the parental relationship? Are they gamers? Right? Is it something that cousins or family members like to play that they watched? We want to know where it's coming from because sometimes if you got to go to the source. You say I think that they're a little too young for this. Right? I think 7, which a lot of gamers are well deep into it at 7, still feel a little too young for it. But if they open the box, then you gotta meet them where they're at.
Thank you. That's all we have for questions. Thank you everyone for attending this presentation, and thank you so much for our speaker.
You're welcome. It was an absolute blast. Thank you so much, everybody.
All right, just as a reminder, please complete our post-event survey. This helps us continue to offer free trainings like these, and then certificates of attendance will be emailed by the end of the week. All right, take care, everyone. Thank you.